Well, let's get into our conversation now. The Central Bank of Nigeria says there are no plans to phase out the redesigned 1,500 and 200 Naira notes from circulation. The Apex Bank said this in a statement issued in Abuja following viral news on social media that the Apex Bank is contemplating the withdrawal of the recently redesigned banknotes from circulation, while restating that a new Naira redesign policy has come to stay and will continue to circulate side by side with the old notes. Well, joining me via Zoom to help us analyze this very dicey situation that we're in is a stockbroker and financial analyst, Mukhtar Mohammed. It's good to have you join us on the program. As always, we're looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask, before I get into the questions, let me just ask you, on a lighter note, when last did you see the new Naira notes?
Since they said they should have the new and the old, I've not seen the new Naira notes.
All right. So which has caused these fears that we seem to be experiencing, me inclusive and some other persons around me that we had this conversation earlier. So the question I want to ask you is, the CBN says that the Naira redesign policy stands. Do you think we won't have the same experience like it was last year if by December 31st, we do not see, the new Naira note in circulation?
Well, I think the first thing we should be asking is if the incoming administration will even still have the current CBN governor at CBN to even continue the so-called redesigning note. We need to ask ourselves that. And if there might not be an extension between the old and the new note, if the incoming administration is not satisfied with what they met on ground. But if you look at what is happening now, it will be a very, very sorry stage if after 6 months we are still going to go back to where we were before the Supreme Court judgment. For me, I think the CBN told us that they have enough of this note, and that judgment said that both the old and the new should be working hand in hand. But what you have seen now, if you even try to see the new, is only the 500 Naira note you get to see. The 200 Naira note and the 1,000 Naira note is practically not available. So it's either one thing is either CBN is looking to exhaust the old notes, or so that at the December we'll have so much of the new note, because that's the only reason I can give for this, for CBN to come out and say, look, we have enough of the old and the new notes in circulation. There's a lot about the board of the CBN.
This is not the first time we will be changing Naira notes in Nigeria. So some persons have advocated, experts have said, digital banking should ideally be the focus at this time. So I want to ask, do you think commercial banks have the capacity in handling the large volume of transactions expected after this process?
They didn't have the capacity, and that's why we got to the challenge that we had the last time they did it. And hopefully, I think they should be working to make sure they meet capacity, because before then, you have like maybe about 20 million Nigerians using the digital platform. But after that, you have about 80 million or 90 million Nigerians at the same time. Definitely, the system experiences downtime, and then we start seeing payment not going through. This is what I expect the CBN to have been doing at this time, is to partner with those banks, to partner with the Nigerian bank settlement system also, to see how they can build capacity or come up and enjoy one facility whereby all can also partake of it, because that's what is done in America. The Bank of America has built a facility where other banks, they can share that facility, either in digital transfer, digital transaction. So definitely, I think that what I expect the CBN to be doing at this moment, not to wait till the 11th hour when every situation is becoming dicey, and they begin to say, look, you know what, banks should begin to partner with Nigerian settlement system.
But, people have suggested that reducing cash in circulation might naturally be a good idea. But if you take a look at how, just like you alluded to, how other developed countries did, how they did their own process, what do you think is the ideal situation to achieve a seamless transition now?
You see, any economy to grow, you have to come out with innovation. Cashless policy is not a new innovation, but we are trying to rigid it to get many Nigerians to be on that cashless platform. Now, Market innovation certainly is driven by economic activities. That's when you begin to see innovations in terms of creativity on how to make things easier for people that are playing in that market. But unfortunately, I beg to say that this current decision by the CBN was more or less of a political innovation than a market economic driven innovation. So then we started seeing the challenges because it was done in a political year very close to the election. So there was a lot of permutation. Of course, you know, Nigerian election is largely driven by exchange or movement of cards from point A to point B. So for me, that I think was the main reason why we had this challenge. It's not that people don't want to migrate to the digital platform. And now we need to look at our economy. That was it. We don't just go to an economy and do copy and paste. You get what you have in that economy, then you bring it here and you say, okay, let's copy it and then just bring it. No, you need to know that Nigerian economy is largely driven by the informal sector. The informal sector is largely a cash-driven sector. Now, the informal sector that is cash-driven is the same thing in other developed nations. We have the informal sector, which is also a cash-driven sector. But you need to look at the percentage of those countries' citizens that are in the informal sector compared to the percentage we have in Nigeria. For Nigeria, we have about 80% of large transactions done in the informal sector. So, and those transactions are largely driven by cash. So by the time you start that section of the market of cash, then that was why we got the challenges that we had. So you should have come up with a systematic way. You had about 3.2 trillion that was in circulation, and then you brought it down to 1.3 trillion. That for me was too drastic, and that's why the economy could not cope. And if you follow the earnings that we are seeing in the market, we begin to see some companies that suffer as a regard from the CBN decision.
Of course, a lot of persons have, of course, we don't want to go back to that period when it was difficult to even buy sachet water or difficult to even move around Lagos, particularly in places like Lagos. And looking at the long queues and the man hours wasted at banks just to get 1,000 Naira or get 5,000 Naira from the counter, it was really hellish for a lot of people. But I want to ask you, what do you think can be done to accurately carry people in this informal sector along, particularly those who do not use the internet to access their money?
Well, that's why a country like Kenya, the telecom company, Safaricom, came up with a product that was mostly driven in the rural area. And today we have over 80% of Kenya doing their transaction digital. We need to come to enlightenment. That's why I said when the CBN made their decision, they would have gotten a national orientation agency involved. And that agency would have been able to mobilize, especially in the rural area, to let them know the importance of having a cashless society. Now, with that again, that cannot be done alone. You must have to provide the infrastructure so that when those transactions are being done, we don't have a failed transaction. And BS, no matter how much your system is seamless, you could have a failed transaction, but there should be a certain hours that transaction should be resolved immediately, rather than having a transaction run for over 1 week or 2 weeks. So for me, that is the big challenge that we have. And I think that's what the CBN should be thinking of. How can we enlighten more Nigeria in the informal sector? The informal sector, quite frankly, during this cashless policy, a lot of them embraced it. Even the person selling corn,
tomatoes.
I mean, I had an experience. Yeah, I had an experience. I went somewhere, I wanted to buy granite, and I said, "Oh, I don't have cash." And the lady said, "You know what? I have a POS terminal," and she wasn't charging anything extra. She wanted to just put your card and she gets a transaction. So I think there have been a lot of people that have found their way into the digital space. That space has come to stand, but we need to enlighten Nigeria, especially those in the rural area that like looking at their money rather than saying their money is in space.
Exactly. It's pretty ironic, that banks, about 9 banks, came out last week to say that they had recorded profits in the first quarter of this year, considering the demand deposit dropped by 19.9 trillion Naira So I'm trying to understand the dynamics here as to how the banks are saying they're getting profits and then people are still not getting cash, or some are even withdrawing their monies from the banks. Mr. Mohammed, are you still with me?
Yes, I can hear you. I lost you.
Yeah, I was saying that it's pretty ironic that banks are saying, about 9 banks last week said that they had recorded some profit in the first quarter of this year. And we're also seeing the story that there are demand deposits dropped by 19.9 trillion naira. I'm trying to understand what the dynamics are and how the redesign policy has impacted the microeconomics of Nigeria.
I think it didn't impact the macroeconomy of Nigeria, because the macroeconomy for me is the informal sector, and that sector was non-existent, and that sector is even struggling to come to existence. And that is why I think the incoming administration, the first thing is to see how you can galvanize that sector and bring that sector, because that sector is the life wire of the Nigerian economy. It's the largest employer of labor in the Nigerian economy. Now, why when you look at the bank, why they were able to make so much profit? The policy in itself will have to, at the end of the day, will favor the banks. I mean, what they lost in terms of physical deposit, they get in terms of transaction, whereby there was a lot of transfer done. Some banks have in their internet digital platform transaction went as high as 900, 100 and something percent, above 100% that they use. Some of them that were doing very low. They begin to see a lot of Nigerians want to be involved in the digital platform. So the banks in itself, you could say about the deposit, but you should realize that deposit also, when you look up deposit in the bank earning sheet, you also know what are the strategy of the bank. Some banks don't want to be keeping deposit, rather they expect that their money should go out for loan. So definitely it's neither here nor there. But I think what people have seen and what I have seen of this is that a lot of Nigerians have embraced the digital platform, and that is why you saw the kind of profit by the banks, especially in regard to the digital platform transactions.
Monetary policy can't run an economy in isolation. So I want to get what's your advice for the incoming government with regards to synergy between the fiscal and monetary to help achieve this inclusive growth that we want to see in our Nigerian economy?
First and foremost, I think the incoming administration should first of all come up with the economic blueprint, and then also look at the monetary policy, how they can also work together. Because the outgoing administration had different ways that they operate. The monetary policy and the fiscal policy were very far from each other. So I want there should be a synergy. That's why we are seeing a disparity in terms of the exchange rate volatility, in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of commerce. So, but I expect that the income challenge, like digital platform challenges, because that seems to be the major challenges that have hindered Nigerian business from growing. So I expect them to sit down. They also depend on who the president has on his team and the kind of economic policy he wants to drive. That's why I'm saying that we might, I might be wrong, not see the current CBN governor being there to drive this policy, because there's been an open argument even between the incoming administration and the CBN governor, even before they came to power.
Stockbroker and financial analyst Mukhtar Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.